important, which is why I've seen some teachers working very hard to say, leave all that stuff out there, you know, where you don't have to respect women or whatever it is, you know, that stays out there. This is a school, everyone's got rights, everybody, including me, and so on and so forth. And so they tried, and I can imagine in 5 years' time, if people are playing this, let's say using object relations theory, as some people do, they'll have this big ball, which you'll sort of say, this is the home ball, right? You know, now let's put that outside the classroom, in the little box there, that's home, right? That's gone now, that object's gone, you're now in school. And so there'll be all these role plays or somethings. I've seen one person with a smart ball where you take your picture and you bring it across and you lob it at school. So you're now at school. Anything that somehow is, it's sort of, I don't know, it just emphasises in some other form that school's here and it has its expectations, and that's home and it has its expectations. And yeah, they might clash, but now you're in school. Now, whether you change the way they think, I don't know. It might change the way they behave in school and maybe pretend to think in school. I don't know. It's an interesting question. How powerful are you in terms of things like, I mean, a classic would be, do your enemies or people you don't like have rights? Now, there's a simple question. Is someone you really dislike, for whatever reason, does that person still have a right to be emotionally and physically safe in your presence and a right to get on with their learning? Because technically they do, you know, but do you really believe that? I don't like them. Why can't I hurt them? Why can't I stop them from learning? Too bad if I distract them. It doesn't worry me. It would be an interest. Anyone playing this out in their schools? Yeah?
Many of our students are Muslim and also have Turkish and Christian Lebanese, and so the Arab Turks thing. So talking about racism all the time comes up. But I would never tell my Muslim or Arabic students about my Jewish heritage. I thought that's too hard for me. That would be too hard to go there with these kids because I don't think they're ready for that sort of challenge to our relationship.
It's interesting. I supervise a whole bunch of Arabs and so on. So, and we manage very nicely, and we manage to disagree. And that's sort of what Australia offers you, and that's something that we need to think about how you do. How can you get there then?
Because those students, if I talk about racism, they can understand in terms of the Turks and the Arabs, but they all hate Jews. It's just like
But even if you dealt with that initially,
I deal with that.
Then that can generalise theoretically, ultimately.
I don't think I've got anywhere.
No. Oh, we wouldn't expect short-term changes. I mean, it's an interesting dilemma. And I think it's a dilemma Australia, well, a lot of countries are facing. And we need to hit it sort of head on in a way, and I think this rights and responsibilities is a useful beginning point. Yeah?
I've just found I've got grade 2. I've just found with my kids that I thought before that I was doing the local stuff that I was doing, and I think I wanted to start in its infancy, but I'm now more far more explicit with what I'm talking to kids about. And we have like values-based code of conduct or knowledge at school, but this is kind of adding another layer to it. So the kids can talk the talk with the value stuff, and now I'm making them walk the walk as well. You know, like
Yep.
they're starting to understand the relationship on a very simple level at this point. But what we were talking about before, where what's expected at school is what's expected at school, what's expected at home. So even things like restaurants at lunchtime, where the kids actually have expectations that they'll sit in their chair, that they'll eat quietly, that they won't speak to someone when they're mouthful of food. Now, I know that sounds a ridiculously simple thing to do, but for a lot of my kids, that's not an experience they have. So every time we do these things, we're actually giving them another skill to deal with life, because wherever they go in their life, it's not going to be the same set of values that they have in a particular setup. So I kind of think it doesn't matter what it is that we're dealing with, each time we do this, we're giving them another set of strategies and skills to deal with what life is going to put to them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think it would run deeply enough that if they came into a setting where this was not being sort of portrayed, they would say something among their peers that, you know, you really shouldn't treat her like that because she has a right to feel safe.
Well, I'm actually finding with my kids, even though, again, it's on a very simple level, that they're starting to actually, if I'm speaking, I will hear. Or if somebody else is speaking, you know, it's starting to sort of infiltrate.
And the trick will be to somehow between that and the problem of they're all going to control me, and they might control you, especially the D's. I'll jump in there with a vengeance possibly, and love being heavy on the other kids. So how do you manage that as an instructor, that they learn to do that productively? Because that would be the next dilemma, isn't it? How do you set it up? And I don't know how to do that either. But as a teacher, you would have to have processes that enable that. Like I said, one teacher had 3 buttons. Okay, so only 3 kids got to do that in any 1 week and got feedback on how well they were actually able to encourage other people to do the right thing and whether they were doing it in a way that respected their rights. So that would be part of the process, I guess, to come up with ways of implementing what seems to be a good idea. The good idea being that rights and responsibilities actually is a very reasonable basis for expectations of behaviour in schools. Now implement that any way you like, but it's got to be to a level where they actually do internalise some of this stuff, and maybe they never will because a home life may not value it and it may not be strong enough, or maybe we don't know.
Do you think so that it's not like a different effect though? Because we've been talking about it at school. Okay, it's not something we're going to see a big change in immediately. I mean, we will see changes, but you would hope that the kids that are now in prep, and as each year progresses,
That's why I got involved, because I was told it was a 4-year project.
We're hoping that will actually have that impact.
Yeah, I don't expect, I mean, if you came into a year 10, as I did at one point, and even in fact my last 8 secondary schools, very little happened, because you're not going to have that impact in a year at that point of entry. But if you had a developmental process over, say, 4 years, you'd expect to. And I think the other thing you said, which is interesting, is that you do have to be overt. It's really funny. You know, we've got these values floating, but people are very careful about not being too overt about certain things, and I'm not sure why. But maybe I can see in secondary school they don't think it's their business. You know, they're there to teach a subject, and so they may not so overtly push the fact that that's why they come to rules, because rules are pretty safe and they're school related and they're hierarchical, and that's what schools traditionally been about. But I think the more overt you are, the better. So if I can say to someone, look, you're speaking and they can't hear, it's not fair. Just to say that would be it's against the rules, that's one thing, but it's not fair, it's not right. And we went through a whole period where you never were allowed to say that, in fact, in the 80s, because Glasser said it was an unfortunate choice, yeah? Only because it was going to affect you primarily in a negative way. You're going to be timed out or something, but it was just an unfortunate choice. Well, it's not just an unfortunate choice. It's wrong. And that's going to be, who's going to be that overt? I don't know. It's sort of an interesting question.